Mr. Newmoff is absent. Ms. Kalinowski?
Here.
Mr. Bush?
Here.
Vice President Darrow?
Here.
President McClelland?
Here. Present. Whatever. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Looking at the meeting agenda, do we have any additions or corrections to this morning's agenda?
No, thank you.
Okay, so with that, I would ask for a motion to approve this morning's agenda. So moved.
Second.
Mr. Darrow, and the second by Mr. Bush.
Vice President Darrow?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
President McClelland?
Yes. We have an opportunity for public participation. No one got up early enough to show up, so that's good.
We love to hear from you.
We do. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant to keep everything
I
on
understand.
pace.
I know what you meant.
So that will move us on to superintendent's items A through 4, or 1 through 4, excuse me. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Kalinowski and Mr. Bush. Mr. Sawyers.
Thank you, President McClellan. Board of Education members, this morning at the special meeting, we're asking for approval for 4 action items. The first is the approval of the 2018-19 school year bus routes. These would have appeared on the August 13th Board of Agenda. However, Mrs. Honecker finished them Wednesday evening, and in an effort to provide advance notice to families beginning in the first part of August, well in advance of school starting, we're going to go ahead and approve the bus routes. Mrs. Jenkins and I work with Mrs. Honecker to do cost-benefit analysis of how to maximize the existing fleet, as we've talked about in the past. So based upon the analysis that we did in going through and looking at the routes and maximum loads to actually use the buses most effectively and efficiently, we're recommending that there are no changes for the 2018-19 school year. Specifically meaning that although Board of Education policy, it basically was adopted after the levy reductions, for the history to go to the 2-mile rule within the school district. Based upon fleet capacity, we still believe it is beneficial and available for maximum capacity to transport all students in grades K through 5, because we can put up to 3 students in a seat based upon their physical size and still have the same number of buses in the fleet and provide that as a service to our families because they're the youngest students within the school district. Then thereafter, for grades 6 through 12, it would be for students that are eligible based upon the 2-mile rule, which is current board policy and in line with the Ohio Revised Code. With the exception that any student at the high school level that obtains a parking permit to actually have parking privileges on campus be required to forego their eligibility unless they lose their parking permit. There was a question Mr. Darrow had asked, just for preparation purposes, what it would look like potentially if the cost, because we've had several parents emailing the school district asking, because of the improved financial condition of the school district based upon the due diligence of the administration and the board, what it would cost to restore transportation for grades 6 through 12. So Mrs. Jenkins and I worked with Mrs. Honecker to do the preliminary estimate. It's approximately $1.89 million over a 5-year term, and I gave you the breakdown of that spreadsheet that shows you annual costs that are approximately, that's the sheet that I gave you, the prices on the back, totals on the back. Oh, so I'm sorry, just print on both pages. So if you do the total over the 5 years, it's plus or minus $300,000 each year, but and then you add the additional cost for the busing purchase that would be required. So it's approximately $1.89 million to restore transportation in grades 6 through 12. We are not recommending at this time that occur. We're recommending that the same transportation rules that have applied for the 2017-18 school year also apply to 2018-19. All grades K through 5 will be eligible. Grades 6 through 12 are subject to the 2-mile rule. And if a student obtains parking permit, they are ineligible for transportation. Number 2 is the approval to amend the purchase of playground equipment. I gave you the renderings in front of you just so you can see it. This is the work that we've been doing at the Early Learning Center and as well as the intermediate primary school building to add 3 pieces of motion equipment specifically, and then a cocoon for inclusive play. So we've been working with Play World to do the assessment. I talked about this at the last Board of Education meeting. We have an increase in special education funding from the federal government that we can apply to the capital purchase that will literally pay for one whole playground improvement because it's about $118,000 that we have available. The rest would come from preschool tuition dollars as well as specifically the permanent improvement fund. So we are asking to amend the previous action at last month's agenda to specifically only spend the IDAB money and do both playgrounds based upon the assessment by Playworld. This is to add inclusive play equipment that will help students with mobility issues, including wheelchair and walker, to have the ability to use motion equipment, as well as all of our students on campus. So it's inclusive play equipment that's appropriate for all students that provides motion. So we do have the offset available. Number 3 is the approval of the purchase of the bus that's actually part of the General Revenue Fund purchase this school year. We last month approved the ability to participate in the bid process. So based upon that movement last month to participate in the bid process, we've secured the bid to purchase the bus that's actually part of our General Revenue Fund budget this school year. And we're recommending moving forward with that because it'll take up to 6 weeks to actually get the bus onto the school campus. And then lastly, we have to amend the purchase of the special needs bus. Last month we approved it. We did not include the 10-year warranty and the undercoating. So we've increased the cost by approximately $6,000 because we've asked for the 10-year warranty to be applied to the bus, as well as the undercoating sealing based upon the salt factor that happens in Ohio. Those are the action items for today.
Just as an FYI, we have applied for another grant. If you remember, we did the EPA grant and received a 25% reimbursement for some of our buses. That's done, so we've applied for a second. We won't know whether or not, and it's not an EPA grant, it's a VW grant, but we won't know until October whether or not that's we get that, obtain that grant. But just know, we've applied for a second grant, so hopefully.
Happy to answer any questions you have related to the action items, including bus routes, the playground equipment, or the purchase of the bus or the amendment of the bus.
As far as the bus routes go, I know that this is a constant shuffling sometimes of routes based on the number of students who are riding, but this has been set up so that it maximizes the ability to put students on the bus.
Yes.
That said, do you know how many changes there were made between last year and this year?
So there are some street movements. The bus stops themselves have not changed. So the physical stops in neighborhoods stayed the same. There are some streets that have been moved from one route to the next route based upon the movement of students based upon grade levels. So example is 5th grade was a very large class within the school district. Now it's going to 6th grade. It's moving from elementary routes to middle school, high school routes. To allow the accommodation to maximize the fleet space, there's some streets that have been moved off of one route and added to a route that's adjacent to it. So there's some street movement that did occur throughout the school district based upon the influx of kids in the grade level. But the physical stops themselves are dominantly probably 99% the same. That were the same as last year. So street movement has occurred, which means the student may be moving to a new bus number, but their stop will still be in the same place that it was last year.
So we just need to make sure that, and I know that we'll have communications, but make sure you look to see what number your bus.
You need to check your bus number because there are several streets that have been moved to balance the routes based upon the number of kids now in a grade level, because the 5th grade bubble group has moved to 6th grade.
My goal for transportation was to try to make as few changes to the routes and stops as possible. But do remember that our board policy in Ohio Revised Code does allow for students to walk up to a half a mile to get to their bus stop. So, and we continue to get phone calls about that, but it's not nearly what it used to be.
Do we know when the Rose Run project is going to impact the bus routes?
Yeah. So Rose Run construction will begin in early October. We're working with the city presently and developing the plans. There's several temporary intersections or lights that are coming into city proper to try to help with traffic flow. We met with the city again yesterday, so there'll be an increase in communication beginning in August in preparation for what's going to happen with Rose Run project beginning in October. So we will do a big push for back to school to remind our families of all the alternate locations you can possibly drop. The photo row mast arms are in, the red lights are in at the high school for the new signals that are coming to help with specific traffic flow. for entry and exit and to allow kids to cross back and forth between the Church of the Resurrection. Those crosswalk signals are now in as well. So all that stuff will be ready for back to school. But we did meet with the city yesterday to talk about traffic patterns, and they're still doing some work, but we will send out communications in cooperation with the city based upon their construction project and what's happening. So we are communicating, and more information will start to go to families in August.
Will they actually close Dublin Granville for
Yes.
a while? Yeah.
In all likelihood, a significant portion of Dublin Granville Road will be closed for 15 to 18 months. So the entry at the McCoy will become the first entryway on Dublin Granville Road to the McCoy that takes you through the middle school, high school, or the middle school bus loop will become an entry and exit by October 1st. So we're in the process of setting that up because that should be ready for the first day of school. That was our meeting yesterday with the city on site at the middle school to talk about how that traffic has to flow through that parking lot to allow it to exit back out at the McCoy, because you will not be able to turn right on Dublin Granville Road. You will be forced to turn left because of construction. So we worked on that yesterday with the city, but more information is coming to families in August. So we are preparing it, but and there'll be pictures and maps and everything else that's available. So between our communication staff and the city's communication staff, we're confident that there will be lots of information, but it is going to change where people might choose to drop their students off at school. You may choose to use an alternate loop because of the construction that's going to be happening on Dublin Granville Road.
Thank you.
We have lots of options now.
Yeah.
We have loops all over campus, and people are just going to have to play with them to see which one best meets their needs based upon traffic flow, because it's not just the campus that's being impacted. Traffic throughout the city proper is going to be impacted because of the closure of Dublin Granville Road.
Wouldn't the north entrance, the north loop coming off of 605, I mean, wouldn't that probably have the lowest traffic burden?
In all likelihood, yes.
And much more.
Chatham Green is used probably the least out of all, you're correct. So that new loop that came next to the primary gym is actually used the least amount.
And it's the furthest away from all the heavy traffic.
It is, and it's next to where we drop off all students for buses, because that's where the centralized bus loop is. So it's where we drop every other kid off, and then they walk to their respective building. So it's going to require some change, but we'll do everything we can to communicate it to families.
Maybe encouraging folks to use that northern entrance. On the playground equipment, would you summarize the reason that we need to make this expenditure and what sort of support we're getting from the state?
Sure. So the playground equipment that we're actually recommending is for inclusive play. We have limited access to playground equipment for students in wheelchairs, as well as students with physical mobility issues that are on walkers or other specific apparatuses to meet their physical needs. So the inclusive play equipment will provide motion. For example, the inclusive whirl that's in the picture, it looks like a merry-go-round kind of thing. It doesn't have seats on it, but you can put up to 2 wheelchairs on it with other students and actually allow students to remain in their wheelchair. Presently on the playgrounds, we have one special needs swing that a student is removed from the wheelchair to go into the swing physically and then go back to the wheelchair. The new play equipment that's being recommended actually allows the student to remain in his or her wheelchair and have access for inclusive play on our playgrounds, both at the Early Learning Center with the increase in preschool population now that we've added preschool to the school campus, as well as the primary intermediate school. We're fortunate because we had an unexpected increase in IDEA-B funding. It's specifically for students with special needs. So we can spend $118,000 for capital improvement to help purchase equipment specifically for students that have special needs that are wheelchair bound. Dominantly that could use the new play equipment. So we have students enrolled in preschool, kindergarten, as well as in grades 1 through 6 that are in a wheelchair every single day at school, and this allows us to create an environment for inclusive play. The motion equipment, we have no current motion equipment on campus. The current playground equipment you have to physically climb, or the swings you swing on, but the other big pieces are all climbing apparatuses, which clearly a student in a wheelchair cannot do. This will provide greater access for all students for inclusive play.
And allows kids in wheelchairs to play with
It gives them more choices. They don't have to wait for the swing. And we are adding another swing at each playground. That's also included in this. So we're actually adding more swing play for the kids. But this also gives them an ability to have motion inclusive play with other students, and they don't have to wait just for the swing.
And other students can use the same equipment.
Yeah, all kids can use it.
So they're all connected.
It's meant to be used by all students. It just provides motion. And currently we have no motion equipment on campus, but this dominantly will benefit to meet the IDAB requirements. We have to put in equipment specifically for students that would benefit from a wheelchair play.
Regarding the approval of the bus purchase, just to clarify, that's part of our plan in terms of the replenishing of the fleet.
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct. That's the bus that we already had budgeted in the current year.
It's replacing a bus that's how old?
I think it's 2004.
Right, it's 14 years. And then the special needs bus has a lift issue that's being replaced, and then a floor issue because
We had two special needs buses that needed a lot of repair. One did not pass inspection, so that's the need for the special needs lift bus. And then the regular bus is just replacing a really old bus that we have with a lot of miles that's costing so much to repair. But yes, it's already part of the plan.
Any other questions? Have a roll call, please.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
Vice President Darrow?
Yes.
President McClellan?
Yes. That's the end of our items, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Mr. Darrow?
Second.
Ms. Kalinowski? Have a roll call,
Vice
please.
President Darrow?
Yes.
Ms. Kalinowski?
Yes.
Mr. Bush?
Yes.
President McClellan?
Yes. We are adjourned. Our next meeting,
August 13th.
August 13th.